Hello everyone, thanks for coming to Activate and to my presentation about Solr's new package manager for plugins. I work at Salesforce and I'm a prolific member of the Lucene project, working on Solr and Lucene for many years now. I'm a member of the PMC. I co-authored the first book on Solr. That's one of my main claims to fame. I'm going to start this with a quiz question that's fun to think about. How many plugin types do you think are in Lucene and Solr combined? And by plugin type, I mean an abstraction, like you see here in yellows. You see some examples. Some analyzers and filters are just two of them. And I don't mean the actual instances of those things, which of course there are many more because there are many filters. I just mean how many base types are there. If you think about this for a bit, what number comes to mind? What do you think? Come up with a quick number at the top of your head. Think about that. How many? I did a count and came up with 150, and that blew me away. 150 is a lot. I don't know, I was thinking maybe 30 something, 40? No, it's a lot. The exact number is hard to, it would take me a bit more time to figure out the exact number, which doesn't really matter what the exact number is. Well, the message here is that it's a lot. And search platforms need to be pluggable. It's really a prerequisite to have a good search platform. If it's not pluggable, then you're kind of locked into a box that functions in a certain way that's not flexible. Because a platform fundamentally is something you build on it and you work with. So it's really important. One of the first things I did with Solr early on was write a little plugin, a little query parser. Where do you get these plugins today? Well, fortunately, Solr comes with many, and I'd say most of the ones that you need. And for many people, it's enough. And for those, you don't need to install them. They're just there. You just refer to them. Solr comes with a contrib directory of so-called contribs. Those are, of course, they come with Solr. The jars are there. You need to put those jars into the right place, but they're there and ready for you to use. Pretty easy. Then there might be some third party out there on the internet somewhere. There are vendors that will sell you some very nice ones, like for multilingual analysis, text analysis, for example. And you need to get those jars somehow, and then you install them. And you might hear about these from the Solr Ref Guide, from your colleagues or your own projects, all kind of places where you might find information about these. But I'd say it's kind of tricky to find out about third-party plugins. It's hard to even know that they exist today. And once you have them, where do you put these jars? The ideal place is first listed there in Solr Home's lib directory. The second choice there is only really applicable in Solr standalone, and only if you're trying to have cores have different libs, then you could use that option. I haven't seen that used in years now. There's the option of putting a lib directive into Solr config. And if necessary, and hopefully you don't need to do this, but there are some types of plugins that only really work if you put them into the webinf lib, which is not really ideal because that's kind of messing with Solr's internals. Also, in the bigger picture here of plugins, Solr Solr has plugins, yes, but Solr comes with Jetty and uses Log4j, and you might have other plugins that are more at a JVM level or logging level or Jetty level, and those go in those directories listed on the bottom. To configure these plugins, well, some plugins require very, very little. You usually need to do something. It's with almost no exception, you need to do something to actually configure and to that the plugin activates. And you look at the documentation for these plugins depending on where you got them, what you have to do. Sometimes it's a very simple, straightforward thing. You register it in the same way every time. The query parser is typical. But even with a query parser, you might have a custom query parser that requires configuration to point to a database. Maybe I've seen interesting plugins that point to places and you have to configure connection information or something that's specific. And furthermore, some plugins, it really requires the user of them to fundamentally know where in Solr to fit it in a bigger context. In particular, many parts of the schema really require you to know how you want to configure Solr to use that plugin in the right way. The bottom line I'm trying to express here is that some plugins have a way that, some plugins you're always going to configure the same way, and some plugins you'll want to, is really fundamentally a customizable choice that's specific to the user. And what if you want to upgrade your plugin to the latest and greatest version? If you can basically shut down Solr and deploy new jars, then this is pretty easy. Maybe not quite as easy if you have a cluster, because then you have to arrange for all those jars to get there, etc. But if you don't want to just shut down Solr and just add them, then it gets complicated. I don't even, it's hard to say that there's even a templated approach to this. It really kind of depends on your environment, your prod environment, production, and what that looks like, and what does it mean to load new code. It's really kind of custom, and it's hard, and that's probably the biggest pain point that we're going to try and address here. Okay, so let's make this easy and automated. There are systems we can learn from and be inspired from to build a system in Solr. I'm sure those of you have used Unix have seen RPM packages. If you've been to Docker Hub, then you've seen containers, images you can get. And it's what's interesting here is that these systems have unified the approach to find and install that that package, or whatever you want to call it, and that's great. Okay. Now, just looking at the previous slide, this might seem just like a nice-to-have feature, just nice, and not necessarily a huge deal. Maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but I'm here to say that this is a huge deal to Solr, and it's a bigger deal than it may seem on first light. Even if you think installing a plugin doesn't sound like a big deal, the fact remains that Solr has grown so big in part because it's hard to find plugins out there, so people are motivated to try and get everything into Solr, and that there's a bunch of problems that flow from that. Basically, Solr is becoming large and hard to maintain, and there's sometimes a security vulnerability somewhere within Solr on a plugin that you may not even use, but because it's there, it could be activated potentially by an attacker sometimes, and then therefore there's a higher security risk because of all these plugins that are built into Solr. Also, it's contributed somewhat to some of the explosion of dependencies within Solr is because of all these plugins that are living inside Solr that could be externalized. And furthermore, there's some side benefits too. I mean, if you can detach the plugin into a separate package that you then version and release separately, it becomes something that you could potentially mix and match with different versions of Solr with different versions of a plugin by detaching them. It also makes, I think there's better opportunity for people to contribute to the Solr ecosystem in a package which is likely to be far more approachable than the massive Solr code base, which can seem foreboding to some that are not experienced with large code bases. And this will ultimately lead to Solr slimming down. And so really, this is a huge deal to Solr. I think this is a bigger deal than the immediate benefits of the package manager itself. The bigger deal to me, as someone who works within Solr, is all these kind of second-order effects about the implications of having a successful package manager. You've probably never heard of this website, solr.cool. I think that will change. I think pretty much everybody using Solr will eventually know about solr.cool because it's likely to be the de facto package repo, third-party package repo for not just packages for Solr's new package system, but also for other things that work with Solr as well. So I want to make sure you're aware of it. And you may be less likely to need to be aware of it today because Solr has so much internally, but over time, expect the data import handler and other packages to find their way to third party where many people will need to access those packages and will likely come here to get it. Solr's new package manager, exciting. So there are 3 components of the package manager I'm going to highlight here. One immediately is certainly the CLI. You're probably going to interact with the package manager over the CLI. That CLI does talk to an HTTP API backend, which you can talk to as well for automated purposes. There's also a file store API backend. And the file store in particular, I want to highlight here because it's not just some internal, it's not just something that the package manager needs to do its job. It's something that potentially has use beyond package management. So a package manager needs to store jars somewhere, and it shouldn't just drop these jars into the pre-existing locations I listed earlier. It needs a new place, and it needs a place that's replicated across the entire Solr Cloud cluster. And that's what the file store is. And it's pluggable, so it's potentially someone might make their own implementation that gets data from who knows where. But it's an exciting capability that's new to Solr 8.4. And I could foresee it, for example, being used to store relevancy models or something like that. Now this new package manager has a bunch of features beyond the immediate obvious ones of its existence of being able to install a package from some repository. Besides that, like what are the kind of more detailed finer points? One is that it's a runtime system. It's not something that just fiddles with paths on the file system. So Solr Cloud, firstly, must be running. It interacts with Solr Cloud. Perhaps one day there might be an offline operation, but I think that's been not quite has been tested as much. So that's maybe in the future. A key thing here is dependency isolation. So if you have a package that depends on Guava and Jackson, well, Solr Core happens to depend on Guava and Jackson. But we might imagine a future Solr where we've hardened dependencies more, so that Solr Core's dependencies are more isolated, where packages are more easily able to have their own versions of various dependencies and are less likely to introduce what's sometimes called jar hell. So this is a great thing. Security was thought from the beginning. The packages are signed with a public key. When you're running Solr, you tell your Solr cluster what keys you trust, and so it's really well thought out. It's not an afterthought. And an exciting and scary feature, depending on your point of view, is this notion of hot loading. So imagine you've got a large cluster with lots of Solr cores. And imagine that it's maybe in your organization, maybe it's kind of brittle to reload those cores. With hot loading, you can actually, the package management system can deploy a package, and if that package is comprised of only of plugins that support hot loading, then those plugins can be deployed live to those Solr cores without any Solr core reload, which is both cool and exciting. You can use it if you want, or don't use it if you have concerns about it. Multi-version support allows the cluster to have more than one version of a given package at a time. And a great example of why you might want to do this is if you're trying out a new version, you might want to try it out on just one collection, kick the tires on it more to get more confidence on it, and then deploy the latest version more broadly. Finally, another both scary and exciting feature is the ability for packages to come with configuration instructions to basically self-configure. For some types of plugins, that's plausible, that could make sense. Or maybe it will only make sense in a demonstration mode or hello world, just getting started mode. For certain types of plugins, that just can't work because like things in the schema need to go in certain places that it really fundamentally depends on your schema. So the plugin cannot a priori come with sensible configuration for that. So, but it's nice that it's there, and it makes getting started with Solr and new plugins much easier, which is great. I'm going to demonstrate the new package manager now. We need to start Solr in Solr Cloud mode with a flag to enable it. It comes disabled by default, but I imagine that might change by the time 9.0 hits. We're going to add what's called a package repository, which of course is a repository of packages, and packages is merely a set of jars that contain plugins. I'm going to do a little demonstration showing how to list them, how to install them. Installing means taking the jars and bringing them into the system, but nothing more. Deploying is the final step, which involves associating collections and their config sets with these packages and configuring them to add the plugins in question. Okay. So now I'm going to switch to the command line. Hope you can see this okay, everybody. I'm going to run Solr in Docker. Again, we see the -C up there for Solr Cloud mode, and we see that we're enabling the package manager. Okay, it's going to start up in a second. I am going to bash into our Solr instance. We named it Solr. Excuse me. Okay, now I'm going to do some sequence of commands inside the container I'm going to create a Solr core called my_data. And now I'm going to add a Solr document using CSV. These particular two commands, don't worry about them. They come with the Solritis plugin. And so now we're ready to start some package manager, a demo of that. Before I continue further, I want to show you the Solritis project on GitHub. So this is in this GitHub repo, we have some source code for a Solr plugin. We also have a repo directory that has a package, that is a package repo. I wouldn't expect this approach to be that common in the future. Once Solr.cool grows in popularity, and once it truly becomes a package repo, which it's not quite, as I speak, it's not quite yet, one can expect that you'd deploy deploy packages to Solr.cool if you're a third party. And if you're in your company, you can expect that you would have a repository of plugins for your only for your company, and that might be detached from the packages, okay? And it includes some instructions. I'm basically going to run these instructions, but I'm going to walk you through to see what happens so it doesn't seem so confusing the first time you run it, okay? So we have Solr running. The first step, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the repository to the package system. Now, bin Solr package. This is bin Solr package is a new command to the Solr CLI, and it's quite nice. It has color coding, and it will show you some help about each of the commands, okay? What I'm going to do right now is add repo. I'm naming it Solritis, and according to the instructions, this is where it is, okay? And by doing this, by the way, I'm telling my Solr cluster to trust this repository. If I don't trust it, or if I'm trying it for the first time, use Docker, use an isolated environment, of course. Trying to get you to think of security first, okay? Now, what I want to point out is what happens behind the scene when you add a repo. What does that really mean? Well, if I go to the Zookeeper tree over here, we see repositories.json. I simply want to point that out, that it's simply a repositories.json file. That's all that happens. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list the available packages. Package list available. Let's see. We're going to see Solritis, and we're going to see version 0.95. Okay. Next, let's install Solritis. Okay. this brings the jars into the cluster from the remote repository. Okay. And to try and make this point clearer, I'm going to show you in the file system where it goes. So var Solr data is Solr's home directory, which contains the file store directory, which is where the package manager stores its jars and their packages. And there we see the jars for it. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now comes kind of the exciting part. We're going to deploy the package. Okay, start from the top. So deploy -y means yes. Say yes to all questions internally. I don't recommend doing that the very first time you're trying it. Solritis is the package we're deploying. Collections lists the collections we're going to deploy it to. It happens to be just one. It's common to limited. And -p df equals title is a configuration parameter for the self-configuration. Okay. And what's really nice about this is that this command tells you what it tells you the configuration it's doing. So I said earlier that packages self-configuring themselves is both exciting and scary at the same time. Well, at least rest assured, what it's doing is something you can see. And if you don't do the -y, then you have the option of opting out of anything and effectively doing the same commands manually or tweaked to your environment as you need. So this one's adding a response writer. That's the main part of what Solritis is, by the way. It's adding a request handler browse for its demonstration purposes. Good example, if you weren't actually using, if you did want to use Solritis for real, you probably wouldn't want /browse. You'd probably have your very own request handler in mind that you would want to register. And it's doing some other things. But that's the configuration that's happening, okay? And I also definitely want to point out that this deployment, what did it do? Well, it not only ran those commands, but those commands had some effects. In particular, config touched two things. I want to mention params.json in the config set. So the collection my_data has a config set my_data, and config sets have an optional params.json file. That's not new here. And the package manager relies on that to store the version association in this file. So we have Solritis package, and we have a particular version that we're using. Okay, and that's what's happening there. And let's see. Let me hit reload on the screen. This screen right here is powered by Solritis being installed. Okay. Yeah. Now let's go back to the presentation. Okay. So that showed automated configuration. Well, this configuration was specified with the package. And I'll show you soon what that looks like in the package. But you may not want the package to self-configure itself. You might want to do it manually yourself. And when I say manually, it's not necessarily literally manually. It might very well be automated by tools. Basically, you need to make sure that the params.json has the version of the package you're using as specified here. I'm showing what this looks like literally as if you were to actually edit it. You very well might use the params API, a part of the config API, to arrange for the same thing to be set in an automated way. And in your config set, in Solr config in particular, for Solritis fundamentally ships a response writer plugin. So this is the declaration of that response writer in XML format. What's new here is that the class attribute starts with the name of the package, and then the standard class name within this. So this tells Solr that load this class from the class loader associated, the internal Java class loader associated with the Solritis package. Okay, so it's not actually too much magic. And again, you could edit these files like I'm kind of hinting at here. You could also script this using config API commands. I'm not saying you should do one or the other. It kind of depends on how you do things already. Okay, how to create a package. So I'm going to briefly, very briefly, show you Solritis how it does it. You go to the repository. We have the public key for the repository. We have repository.json and the jars next to it. So repository.json, it lists the packages and their versions. So for each version, it could potentially have different jars even and everything. As I go through this, I'm going to mention that we see a range of Solr version it supports, and we see what happens when this shows the setup command, which is interesting, and the uninstall command and the verify command. So these commands are basically config API commands for the self-configuration. Again, if you don't want to package your own plugins in such a way, then you don't have to. It'll be up to you to configure them as you see fit. And we can see here some variable substitution in some cases. Okay. Now there's, I think there's really a bright future here. I mean, the essentials are really in place for the package manager. This came out in 8.4, it's now 8.6. 8.7 is supporting many more plugin types because it's supporting the plugins in the schema, which is really huge. Only of the 150 plugin types, it'd be hard to venture a guess at the moment how many are supported, but the ones that are most commonly used are supported. And you can expect that number to grow over time. It does depend on Solr Cloud right now. I haven't yet seen any hint of that changing yet, but I imagine some users would like to see that. I also want to mention that, of course, not only do we need the package manager to work over more plugins, but we need more packages to actually be out there. That means that even Solr's contribs need to be packaged as such. You can expect that the contrib directory to be basically a de facto first-party plugin place for the plugins that come with Solr that will be pre-trusted. And Solr Cool, more and more people are going to be more aware of this as more plugins have a home to be known there, solving one of the major problems today of packages existing third-party plugins because nobody knows about them. Even Solr's admin UI, by the way, there are competitors to Solr's admin UI. One of them is Yasa. Yasa, yet another Solr admin, is already packaged and makes for a fine first-time experience to seeing the package manager in action as well. Okay. I'm going to leave with one slide here, the resources slide. The Solr Ref Guide has information on the package manager. There's a couple pages at the moment. One of them is the high level right there. The other is more of the internals. Also, I'll jump down below, by the way. There's a blog at Semitext, a pretty good post really about the plugin system and how to use it, a bit more of a tutorial kind of orientation to it, which is I think really helpful. I'm listing a couple package examples right there. Many people will become familiar with Yasa, I think. It's not a typical plugin, but it's neat to see how the plugin system, it's neat to see how this new package manager is able to support UI components, which is to some people like a new idea. Okay, and last year there's a presentation about the new package manager at the time. So this is an updated presentation that you're experiencing right now. And that is it. So thank you for coming to my talk.